Hello, this is Giulio from the Agro-Eco project. Today we're in beautiful central Massachusetts and we'll be demoing a great chestnut pasta. The purpose of this cooking demo is to highlight some of the perennial ingredients that we can work into our diets. If you haven't already, please visit our other video detailing the importance of perennial agriculture, and you can see an example of agroforestry system in practice. Now today we have chestnut flower from Forestopia, great company that specializes in agroforestry produced products. Just has a fantastic nutty profile. It's a little sweet and makes a fantastic pasta. We will also be featuring some Kernza flour. Kernza is a perennial wheat. Again, very important to start including within our diets a little more of the perennial vegetables and perennial products that come off of our farms. Chestnuts have been a staple of rural communities for a very long time. Before industrial wheat was commercially available for everyone at any moment, many rural communities, especially that lived at higher altitudes, relied on chestnuts. They would harvest chestnuts in the fall, mill them into flour, and then use them to bake cakes like castagnaccio in Italy, and just developed a rich tradition, a rich gastronomic tradition around chestnut flour. Now, the nutritional aspects of chestnut flour are very important to highlight. As we said, it was a great source of carbohydrates. It is rich in polyphenols and antioxidants, rich in potassium, great source of fiber. It is gluten-free, of course. And in terms of allergies, chestnuts rank very low on potential allergen lists. Chestnuts are awesome. They're a very underappreciated superfood, which we should be working into our diets a little bit more. And of course, they're a fantastic way to grow food, because food grown in agroforestry systems is more gentle on the earth than food grown in annual systems, in tillage systems, and plants that require a lot of inputs. Chestnuts don't. Now, the second flour we'll be using today in our recipe is Kernza flour. Kernza is a wheat product, but the cool thing about Kernza is that it is a perennial grain, wheat that we don't need to plant every year. If you want to learn more about Kernza, please visit the Land Institute's website. They are a fantastic resource to learn more about perennial grains. And the third flour we'll be using is an all-purpose flour milled from our friends at Maine Grains in Maine, a fantastic company. As we said, we're going to use 3 different flours, but don't be daunted about making pasta at home. Human beings have been mixing flour and water and flour and eggs for millennia. It's very easy and straightforward. It just takes a little bit of practice. And I'll give you a couple tips today so you can learn how to make chestnut flour pasta, as well as normal fettuccine, tagliatelle, ravioli, and all the other fun cuts that you can make. So we'll be mixing our 3 flours today. We mixed our all-purpose, we mixed our chestnut, our Kernza. It's important to mix the flour. What we want to do today is create a little well in our pasta, kind of like a little volcano. If you're from Naples, it can be Mount Vesuvius. If you're from Sicily, it can be Mount Etna. We want to work with a nice wide well. Now in this recipe, we'll be using 5 eggs. Now the golden rule when making pasta is 100 grams of flour to 1 egg. Every Italian child learns this golden rule from their grandma once in their lifetime. It roughly translates to about 1 cup of flour to 1 egg. Today we used 3 different flours. There were roughly 5 cups, and so we used 5 eggs today in our recipe. So once you've cracked your eggs, you want to start mixing them up a little bit. And as we mix them up, we slowly start incorporating some of this flour. As you can see, I'm slowly incorporating more and more, widening my well. Working with a nice wide diameter helps. You want to grab some of the flour from the edges and bring it in. And we don't risk our eggs running around anymore. You can start incorporating all the extra flour and bringing it towards the center. So as we mix everything together, it's time to get our hands dirty. The fun part. Incorporate our dough. It helps to work with the food scraper, scrape off all the little bits, and mix them in. So the ambient humidity will affect your pasta a little bit. If you're inside working with air conditioning or with the heating on, you might notice that your dough is a little dry. Best way to bring water into your dough is to just get your hands wet and work it in, as opposed to pouring water over it. It will not feel as elastic as a traditional semolina or 00 wheat pasta because we're lacking a lot of gluten. semolina especially, very high in gluten. Gives you that nice al dente taste that we love in pasta. In this dough, we are lacking that a little bit. You'll find that the pasta is less elastic and feels a little harder and wetter to work with. But that doesn't mean that it won't be delicious. So in Italy, we refer to chestnut flour also as farina dolce, sweet flour. It's quite sweet. So it's important that your recipe accounts for that sweetness when you pair it with a sauce. So today we'll be serving our chestnut pasta with a lovely shiitake and porcini mushroom sauce. It pairs beautifully with the chestnut flour, and it's a perfect fall recipe. So at this stage, our dough is ready. We've incorporated all the eggs, all that moisture into our dough. Our flours are well integrated. It's lost some of its moisture now. It's not as sticky as it was before. Now we let the dough rest a little bit, half an hour to a couple hours, just like you would any other pasta recipe. Make sure to cover it in a damp cloth or put some cling film over it so it doesn't lose excess moisture. And then we'll roll it out and cut it up. So now while we're waiting for our dough to rest, now we can make our sauce. Now today we're highlighting the flavors of fall, and we will be making a lovely mushroom sauce to go with our maltagliati. That's the type of pasta we'll be making. We'll be talking more about that later. So the ingredients for our sauce today are very simple. These are all ingredients that will complement our chestnut pasta and reflect the flavors of the fall. So we will start with a mirepoix of celery, carrot, onion. That'll be our base. We'll be adding some guanciale, and guanciale is pig jowl. This is cured, kind of like prosciutto, pancetta, or capocollo would be cured. And to bring a little bit more depth to our sauce, we're going to be adding some dried mushrooms. I have a dried mushroom mix here that I've reconstituted in a little bit of hot water. This is a mix of shiitake and porcini. Porcini mushrooms, even dried porcini mushrooms, bring in a ton of flavor and a ton of layers into your pasta sauces. And the other ingredient we're going to be using today is shiitake mushrooms. These are local, they're in season, they're delicious. So the first step when we make our sauce is to start with the base. We're starting with our mirepoix of celery, carrot, onions, which we'll be slowly sweating. A glug of olive oil and start mixing. As they sweat, we're going to put a little lid on. We let this go low and slow as the flavors develop. Now that our base, our celery, carrot, onion, has cooked for about 5 minutes and softened up, released its aroma, we're going to add our guanciale. Now we will not be sauteing this and making a crispy guanciale like we would pancetta or bacon. We're going to try and really have the fat render out to add an extra layer to our sauce. We're working on low heat. We're not looking to saute. We're looking to sweat and develop all those flavors. Now, because this guanciale comes from a heritage breed called Mangalitsa, the fat is very sweet. You might recognize guanciale in dishes like amatriciana, carbonara, griscia, kind of the staples of Roman trattoria cooking. Here instead, we're working a little differently. We're trying to make the guanciale not be the star of the dish, as it would be in a carbonara, for example. But we're just trying to add layers of flavor. All right, at this stage, as the fat has rendered, transferred its great flavor into our base, we're gonna add our shiitake mushrooms, roughly chopped. We're gonna mix those up. We can raise the heat a little bit here. Now we're not looking for caramelization, but to get them to cook a little quicker and develop a little bit more of their flavor. Now to bring a little acidity into our dish, because we have all that fat, that celery, the carrot, the onion, we've added the mushrooms. Now we need a little bit of acidity to cut through all that. We're gonna add a little bit of dry white wine. We're gonna taste it. È buono, possiamo andare. When I went to cooking school, my chef always said, taste, taste, taste. So we taste the wine too. We have to know if it's good, what we're putting in, no? Now, as our wine is evaporated, we can start using our dried mushrooms. Now, the dried mushrooms, as I said before, they were reconstituted in hot water. Now we have a little mushroom broth here going as well. So we can add these. And here we have more dried shiitake mushrooms and porcini mushrooms. As this cooks, to keep the sauce moist, we'll be adding a little bit of this mushroom broth. All right, now that our dough has rested, we can start making our pasta. Today we're gonna make a shape of pasta called maltagliati. And maltagliati in Italian literally translates to badly cut. These are shapes that are usually maybe the leftovers from making ravioli, or shapes that are a little irregular. And they're great in soups and in hearty dishes like our mushroom sauce. So we want to start out by cutting our pasta in quarters. Remember to keep covering your dough as you work with it, because it will continue to dry out. So work one piece of dough at a time. I like to work with a little bit of semolina. You can find semolina by now at almost any supermarket. And the semolina helps us with not letting the dough stick to the board too much. Now in Italy we call the board the spianatoia, and the rolling pin is called mattarello. This is an oak mattarello in Italy, up north in Emilia-Romagna, which is the holy land for fresh pasta, ravioli, tortellini, and all the lovely stuffed pastas are made out of cherry wood. And you'll find that your chestnut pasta is not as pliable as normal pastas would, as a normal, 00 or semolina pasta flour would, because again, we're lacking gluten. It's not as elastic. But what we lack in gluten, we'll make up in taste. Now the thickness of the sheet is not very important. Because this is a rustic preparation, and again, we're making maltagliati, irregular shapes, we're not looking for a uniform, pretty pasta. Now, any cutter will do, but these brass cutters are fantastic. They're my favorite. Again, this is a great recipe you can do with your kids. You can go at it. So what we want to do is, again, you can go any shape you want. I like to do diamonds or rough squares. Then you want to gently open them up. These do not need to dry. Many times we hang pasta up to dry for a moment before we plunge them into boiling water. You can totally do that with these, but there is no need to dry them prior to boiling them. Now that water is boiling, we want to add a little bit of salt. And then we can throw our maltagliati right in. Being fresh pasta, this will take just a couple minutes. Give them a good stir. Now as the pasta comes back up to a boil, we'll slowly see them rise up, and it usually takes about 2 or 3 minutes for them to cook. Again, fresh pasta differs from dry pasta. Dry pasta has to rehydrate, takes 8 to 10 minutes, sometimes 12 minutes for bigger shapes, but fresh pasta usually takes 2 or 3 minutes depending on how big it is, how thick it is. Okay, so now the pasta's come back up. It's been boiling for 2 or 3 minutes. It's ready to be scooped out. We're gonna scoop the pasta out, drain it well, bring it right into our sauce. See how beautiful they came out? Molto belli. What we have to do now is mix our sauce. See also chromatically the colors mesh together. Lovely grate of fresh Parmigiano Reggiano. And give it a good mix. Again, to emulsify the Parmigiano, make it nice and creamy, you can bring in some water. Some of your cooking water, nice full of starch. Full of that chestnut flour flavor as well. Our herb mix today reflects fall and winter flavors. So we have rosemary, we have sage, we have a little bit of parsley, and some thyme. And here you have it, maltagliati al sugo di funghi. We've worked chestnut flour in here, we've worked kernza. Those are 2 perennial staples that's very important to work into our modern day diets. And again, the purpose of this demo is to show how we can bring in more perennial staples into our diet. Perennial staples that are good for the environment, that are good for our soils, and of course good for us. We also hope to do more cooking demonstrations here to bring in more perennial vegetables and show how we can transform obscure ingredients into delicious recipes. Buon appetito and salute. Ciao ciao.